I'd like to welcome John Phillip as a visitor to this particular meeting. The names of everybody else is on the agenda, and they will introduce themselves as necessary. If we could start with a webcasting introduction. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, then it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, then you should move to the upper public gallery. Likewise, anybody on Microsoft Teams, if you don't wish to be viewed, then please set your camera off. Could I also please remind members to activate their microphones before speaking and remember to switch them off when you have finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Chairman, we only have apologies for absence from Councillor Basil Vaz.
Okay. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor Owen.
The item which talks about the sale of the land to Google, I do business with Google in my private life, I guess you want to call it that, my business life. So I'm just going to declare that. Thanks.
And that's non-pecuniary, non-president. Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting, can I accept these as accurate reflections of the previous meeting on the 30th of November? Thank you. Matters arising from the minutes, are there any? No? Item 6, the Audit and Governance Committee work programme as set out. Are there any comments on that, or happy for that to stand as it is? Thank you. Now, as item agenda 6A, for logistic reasons, I would like to bring forward the audited part of agenda number 11 to allow people to leave the meeting once this has been presented, as it is quite detailed. So if we can move to, it's the audited hours. Yes, if I could ask Andrew to present or introduce this important part of the agenda.
So, thank you, Chairman. So this item brings forward the statement of accounts for 2021. I just wanted to go over the process, I suppose, really, for approval of accounts with the committee. The committee is probably aware that we haven't actually authorised or approved any accounts for some time, so this is so probably not current in people's memories, really. So the process for producing accounts is that we usually have a deadline of the 30th of May to produce a draft set of accounts for audit. It was 9th of September 2021 when we actually produced that draft set of accounts, which was beyond the statutory deadline of 30th of July in that year. It was extended because of a backlog due to COVID and delays in producing accounts then. So we produced a draft set of accounts for audit on the 9th of September 2021. That then goes through the audit process, so they're given to the external auditors, Deloitte, who are with us tonight, to review those accounts. It's been drawn out for a variety of reasons that we've spoken about within this committee on numerous occasions, and I don't intend to go into. And then the auditors report back to this committee on their findings of having looked at the accounts, and they are reporting to yourselves as members of this committee on their findings to give you reassurance or otherwise of any issues, so that when you're presented with the accounts, which are the which will follow on after the auditor's presentation of their findings, you'll then be invited to approve the accounts subject to whatever you've heard from the auditors and any reassurance that they've given to you that the accounts are okay to authorise. So I intend to hand over to Mo Ramzan, who's our auditor, to present his findings, or Deloitte's findings from the audit process, and then you will get an opportunity to ask any questions on their findings, and then, subject to receiving satisfactory answers, I will then invite you to adopt the recommendation, which is to adopt the accounts. I would just say on the item that there are currently two recommendations. One is to review the statement of accounts, and the second one is to recommend that to council the adoption of the accounts. We remembered actually that last time accounts were presented to council, we changed the constitution so that audit and governance has the authority to adopt the accounts, and it doesn't now need to be referred to council. So I propose to amend the recommendation. Currently it says that a report be submitted to council recommending the statutory statement of accounts be adopted. I think we can just delete the bit that says a report be submitted to council recommending that the statutory, and all the recommendation, revised recommendation needs to say is that the statutory statement of accounts for 2021 be adopted. Okay. So I'll now hand over to Mo to present the Deloitte's findings on the statement of accounts. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm the Director for Deloitte, responsible for the external audit of the authority. So on today's agenda, it's probably principally three things I'll cover with you. Firstly, our report on the financial statements, audit for 2021. Secondly, the auditor's annual report, which is a high-level document, but also on the agenda. And thirdly, I'll provide a verbal update in terms of progress on the 21-22 audit. So you have some sight in terms of where things stand on the year that follows the financial statements that we're considering this meeting today. So starting with the first item, which is the financial statements audit report. So this within the pack is around page sort of 28, 29 of the pack. So it's, in terms of the order within the pack, it's the second report. Just take you to sort of page 30 of the pack, which is the key messages in the report. And pleased to confirm that audit is substantially complete, subject to receipt of the adopted signed financial statements and management representation letter. Within the ISA 260 report, which we have here, and it is a report that has previously been to audit committee a good while ago, which had a number of matters outstanding which have now been completed. So I'll go through the key messages section of the report, but won't go through the detail of the report, but happy to sort of take any questions. We have included in the report any observations arising from the work that we've carried out on the areas of significant risk as were set out in our original audit planning report. We also confirmed there that the value for money work that we undertake is complete, and that's covered by the separate auditor's annual report, which is also part of this pack. Pleased to say that we've not identified any significant uncorrected audit adjustments or disclosure deficiencies, and within the report we've summarised any findings and audit adjustments that have been noted, and they're on page 26 of the report. But overall, we envisage issuing an unmodified audit opinion on the financial statements, so a clean audit opinion with no reference to any matters in respect of the Council's arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness and the use of resources, or the annual governance statement. Any internal control recommendations that we've noted are included within the report, and management responses have been provided by the authority, and those are included. On page 31 just provides further detail in terms of the work we undertake on the narrative report, and again we've shared any feedback and comments that we've had which have been taken on board by the authority as part of the final version that's presented to committee today. And we note a couple of things around duties and the whole of government accounts, and also the fact that this does relate to a year that was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the factors that required a response from the authority as it did across the sector, and that those are sort of taken into account as part of the work that's undertaken. So I was going to stop there and happy to sort of open for any observations or comments or any questions on this report before moving on to the Auditor's Annual Report.
Thank you, Mo. Are there any questions, points that the members would like to address to Mo or discuss? No? Thank you. John, do you have anything to add at all? Sorry to put you on.
Just an overpowering sense of relief that we finally got here.
Yes. Yes, we've been waiting now. Thank you. So, oh, sorry, yes. Gary.
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Whitehouse joined us after we started the meeting, so can we ask him if he's got any declarations of interest,
right,
please?
No, I don't have any declarations of interest. Sorry for coming in a couple of minutes late, but despite being a public meeting, the door downstairs was locked.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Welcome then. Sorry, yes. So do we now say that we can yeah, back to yourself, Mo.
Chair, I'm happy to pick up the second report, which is at the front of the fact that we're looking at. So this is the Auditor's Annual Report. So it's a slightly higher level report. The first half of the report is a summary of the more detailed report that we've referred to. And the second half, so this confirms again the unqualified opinion. And then the second half of this is the narrative report around the arrangements of value for money, which we're required to understand that were in operation at the authority at the time, and whether there were any significant weaknesses in those arrangements that we needed to highlight as a result of our work. And so page 6 of the pack and page 3 of the report provides the overall key messages. And the work covers 3 scope areas of financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. And the report summarises the arrangements in place at the authority in financial sustainability, recognising the position around the medium-term financial strategy of the authority, and the position around having a balanced budget, but also the budget gap that is being managed was being managed on a medium-term basis, and recognising, I suppose, that in relation to the overall position across the sector, and I think financial sustainability becomes increasingly challenged across the sector as we look into subsequent years. In terms of governance, again, just picking up on the processes and policies in place. Clearly it was a year that was impacted by the pandemic, and some changes to arrangements were made. But overall we were pleased to be able to conclude that there wasn't a significant weakness in arrangements that we needed to highlight within this report, or we needed to reflect within our audit opinion overall. And so this report for 2021 supports an overall clean opinion for the authority. I'm happy again, to stop there and open up to any observations or questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, I guess it's a question for the council rather than to the auditor, but obviously there's some recommendations in here around specifically valuations, and I note in one of the later reports we've written down some valuations and just quality of the accounts and stuff like this. So have we taken steps to follow these recommendations for future ones? I appreciate this is like 3 years out of date, but it'd be good to just get an idea on how we're improving things.
I might hand that over to my team actually to answer and give them a moment in the spotlight for all the hard work that they've done.
Yeah, I haven't got the minutiae handy with me, but to all intents and purposes, most of those recommendations are covered. Some of them some time ago, in actual fact.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? John, Councillor.
Thanks. Yes, it's good to have got this concluded, and it's good that it will end up as unqualified, and now we've got the closing balance for 2021. Can we have an update on the progress for the audits for 2022 and 2023?
I think Mo's wanted to talk about that next.
Yes. I thought, yeah. Any other questions on part 2? So Mo, part 3, thank you.
Okay, so it leads me on seamlessly with that question. So in terms of an update on the FY22 audit, so pleased to report that we're well advanced in the completion of audit work on the financial statements for 21-22. We have been working with the finance team and updating Andrew in terms of the overall position, and we're working towards a timetable that brings back a similar report on the financial statements audit to the March audit committee. So I believe that's towards the end of March, and so really I think jointly both teams are working to a timescale that brings back at least the financial statements audit concluded, and also as part of the requirements around value for money, we're required to produce a report for both 21-22 and 22-23 as a combined report to bring that work up to date, and again that's well progressed. We're looking at the 22-23 elements of that work, and we'll be picking that up with the team over the next sort of month or so. And so that's the sort of next stage really in terms of pushing forward with the 21-22 financial statements audit and concluding that. There is, and members may be aware overall, there is a consultation process going on across the sector, really looking at outstanding audits for previous years at the moment, and how that is handled, with a proposed backstop date which is or has been suggested as 30th of September, and so that's kind of the date that it's being considered nationally for completion of the financial statements audits up to the 31st of March 23, and also any value for money work, and so the 22-23 audit then kind of comes into consideration subsequent to the conclusion of 21-22, and what is and isn't possible as a challenge for both ourselves in terms of scheduling and capacity, and the authority to support that, and that's a challenge that's across the sector. I think recently in terms of 22-23, around 10% of audits for 22-23 had been concluded, so these are an issue, and I don't know whether Andrew wants to add anything further, but that hopefully provides you with an overview of where we are in 21-22 and plans going forward.
Can I just comment on that really as much as, yes, so the consultation was issued last week, at the end of last week. It's been a long time coming, and it deals with the backlog of local government audit accounts that's been a feature, I think, of many audit committees for some time now. And there is vast swathes of unaudited accounts across local government at this moment in time. I think it's well over 400 across multiple years. And the government has come under some pressure to resolve the issue. And have recommended some pretty unprecedented steps, I think, really, which is either sorted out by the end of September, and at the end of September, whether you've reached a conclusion or not, you've got to give an opinion, and that opinion will either be qualified or unqualified at that point in time. But I think we'll see large numbers of local government accounts qualified at that point in time. Government is at pains to say that it's not local government's fault. It's not a big red cross against their homework. It's a move to try and resolve the backlog situation. And there's a raft of other measures in there as well about trying to simplify the process so that we don't go back into the same arrangements for the following year. So there'll be a gradual timetable to bring it back up to date. And the intention of simplifying some of the processes that have made it very complicated for producing accounts and some of the regulations. And I mean, I think overall, I think it's welcome, although the fact that we'll probably end up with multiple accounts across local government that have been qualified at the end of September is an unhappy position to be in, I think, but equally something's got to happen to try and move the overall position forward. So inevitable that something drastic had to happen, and this is that. I think I'll try and provide an update to the committee a bit more detail about the consultation and what it means for this council, and I'll probably have to circulate that via email. I think we might not get the consultation might close before the end of before the next audit and governance committee.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments to be made? Yeah. Yes, yeah.
So you've now been presented with the results of the auditor's findings as a result of their work, and as Mo said, there's an unqualified opinion on the accounts, and the auditors are satisfied with the value for money arrangements as well that this council has for the year 2021. And you have, within that same item, a complete set of updated accounts. I mean, the numbers, council's income and expenditure balance and balance sheet haven't changed as a result of this, but there have been some classification movements. But these have been reflected in the set of accounts that you have in front of you based upon our work with the auditors. So you now have an updated set of accounts that require this committee to either adopt or not, really. But I think you've been given reassurance by the auditors that they are okay to adopt. And so, subject to that amended recommendation, about not recommending it to council but agreeing it yourselves, I think the committee is therefore asked to adopt the accounts if you're happy to do so.
Can I ask members, and I think there's agreement, yes, so we are in agreement to the adoption of these accounts.
Thank you, Chair. Can I it may be remiss of me if I didn't thank Chris, Julia and their teams for all of the hard work that's it's gone on in the last 2.5 years to get to this point in time, and hopefully we'll get 21-22 over the line as well in due course. And I should also thank the auditors as well for their work on this as well.
Yes, thank you, Mo.
And similarly, I'd echo my sort of thanks to Andrew, Chris and Julia and the team in particular.
Okay, thank you. So now move on to risk management. Yeah. Item number 7, risk management. Yes, Sally. No? Oh, it's you. Sorry, I put the wrong name there.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standing item that comes to the Audit and Governance Committee each time we meet, with an update on the Council's Strategic Risk Register, showing what the highest level risks are for the organisation, the ones that affect the whole organisation, as opposed to operational risks, which are contained within operational service risk registers. The report contains a summary of the movements. Most of them have remained the same. There are a number of notable reductions in the risk that we think face the Council at this point in time, and they are failure of the waste contractor service. So as you're aware, we had a number of issues with BIFA prior to Christmas. Was probably prior to Christmas last year or this year. Oh, time flies, I'm not sure anymore. But we had a number of issues with BIFA, and the Council took the decision to internalise the service. Good progress is being made on the actions we need to achieve that. So I think that the risk to the Council of the contractor defaulting and us being left without a waste service and no ability to pick that up ourselves has reduced. It's still red, and it's a recognition of how important that service is to the Council, but it has decreased slightly as we make progress towards the implementation of our in-house service. The next one that's reduced was compliance with the social housing regulations. So the social housing regulator sets a number of standards for key aspects of housing maintenance across our housing stock, around some of the big risk factors like gas safety checking, electrical safety checking, for example, asbestos. We identified some gaps in our information and our documentation, and we put a lot of effort in over the last few months to address that. And as a consequence, we now think we're to the point where the social housing regulator is satisfied with our progress, and hopefully will remove us from the watch list very shortly. And that means our overall level of risk in that area has reduced as well. And finally, delivering a balanced budget and sustainable medium-term financial plan is also reduced, and that's really a factor of the fact that there is a balanced budget on the Council agenda for next week. So during the course of balancing the budget, there's always an element of uncertainty of whether the Council can address the challenges in front of it. But at this point in time, we can say that the Council has been presented with, or will be presented with, a balanced budget next week. So the risk again has reduced, I think, at least in the short term for the Council. That's the main changes that are reported within this document, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you. Any questions from members? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I'd pick up, if I can, on the the finance risk. So the page numbers are missing from my copy. I think it's page 20 to 21, where it talks about maintaining the effective recruitment freeze, and I can see how that helps with the maintaining a balanced budget. But looking at the sort of nature of some of the other risks, cyber security and plans in place of business continuity and so forth, there's equally a risk that if the vacancies arise in the wrong place, the risks in other areas increase. And just sort of flag that up as risk mitigation in one area. You'd be aware it doesn't lead to the balloon pushes out somewhere else and you get increased risks in another area. The other question to ask is on the next pages, where it talks about ensuring protection of taxpayers' interest in the grounds maintenance and commercial assets contract. I mean, I suppose my sort of comment query there is, I'd have thought that was something that went without saying. I wondered why it sort of needed specifically, highlighting as an action that needs taking now.
So if I can, I'll talk about the risk of vacancy freeze. So that was a response to a forecast overspend during the course of 23-24. a large forecast overspend of £1.4 million we felt we were dealing with, really, and so one of the responses was to freeze vacancies. It's equally important that we deliver a balanced budget in the year as well, but given the council's overall general fund balance position as well. So it was important that we took some actions. That wasn't a complete blanket freeze, I would stress. I mean, I think there is, recognising your point, there are certain key roles in the organisation that need to be filled when they become vacant. And so, but what we did do was vet at my level and Jennifer Gould's level is any vacancy coming forward and suppressing the recruitment of those where we could. I think that you'll see from the Q3 report that went to Cabinet last week, the situation in terms of the council's in-year position has changed dramatically as a result of the sale of the parcel of land at North Weald. And that means that our approach can change, but needs to be considered against some of the savings proposals that are built into the 24-25 budget as well, which does mean removing a number of vacant posts within the organisation. But that's been done sympathetically to understanding what the impact on services is. So we've taken that into account when we've put forward savings proposals, but always against the overall objective of balancing the budget as well. And in describing that, I've forgotten the second question. If you could just quickly remind me.
The other one was
grounds maintenance.
Action to ensure protection of taxpayer interests.
Yes, I think perhaps we'll change the wording on that one. I mean, it's a given, really, isn't it? Protecting taxpayers' interests is what we're about as a council and as an audit committee. So it doesn't need to be explicit or stated within this report.
Would it suggest that they weren't being previously, or that they weren't sufficiently being protected previously?
I think why the terminology needs to be changed, really, because it's not, as you say, it's not a reflection of a concern. It's just a kind of probably an inopportune use of wording.
Yeah, and I just wanted to back up Mr. Small on this. I mean, the idea of a recruitment freeze is primarily saying that the default position is not to fill vacancies as they occur, and given that we were having a squeeze on the budget, and that would have potential effect of making some posts no longer required, it was more sensible to say you had to justify why that was a post that needed to be filled, rather than the default being a post has become vacant and it should be filled. So it's more a view of priority rather than absolute, and I think that's what Mr. Small was saying. The other thing I'd say, particularly around grounds maintenance, particularly with taking that over and taking it into Qualis, one of the things that did become really quite clear from that is that we as a council did not have a very good understanding of what grounds maintenance was doing and how it was performing before we took that action. I think that has significantly changed, and for those people who've been at the various scrutiny committees when the report backs have come on grounds maintenance and what's been doing, I think we can clearly see that that's been tracked significantly better. It does mean that the problem was initially that there was no benchmark to start from. We now are having that benchmark and can demonstrate progress going forward.
Thank you. We now move on to this one, internal audit. Yep. If we can move on to item 8, please. Sally.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sue Lindsley, the lead auditor for Epping, and I'd like to take you through this report. I'm going to cover the first part of the report, then I'm going to hand over to Martin, the Corporate Fraud Team Manager, who will cover the anti-fraud and corruption strategy and the whistleblowing policy, and then I'll do the remainder of the report, and we'll take questions at the end. So the first part of the report is for noting only and covers two principal areas, really. The first is the progress that we're making against the 23-24 audit plan, and that's shown in Appendix 1. And secondly is around the overdue and high recommendation tracker. So the summary is shown in table 1, and I'm really pleased to report that the numbers seem to be going down now, which is really good. The detail is in Appendix 2. There's nothing in there that causes me any concern. The 2 high priority ones, which are not yet due, have been had quite a bit of work done on them with Qualis Property Solutions and Housing. And the one that's been on there a really long time, which is the Harlow-Gilston Garden Town Joint Committee. I think the deed is currently being executed, and they hope to have their first meeting in June. I'll hand over to Martin now.
Thanks, Sue. As Sue said, I'll just introduce myself again. My name's Martin Crowe. I'm the team manager for the corporate anti-fraud investigation team. I've got 2 items on the agenda this evening. The first one is a policy that's up for noting every year, and that's the whistleblowing or the confidential reporting policy. That's pages 43 to 54. There's not an awful lot. It's been revised. There's not an awful lot of revision that makes it any different to last year's one, with the exception of two pieces. On page 49, we've just had to update the contact details of the various safeguarding groups around Essex. And on pages 50 to 51, we've also updated the contact details on the policy for staff to report any concerns to, just to reflect staff moves and that kind of thing. So, as I say, I don't mean to go through the whole of the policy. As I say, it is pretty much the same as it has been in the last few years. Just for the sake of clarity, what I would say at the end of that is we've had no whistleblowing reports in the last 12 months. So, okay, so if I can just take you on to the next policy, which you'll find starting at page 55, which is the anti-fraud and corruption strategy, which also includes the anti-money laundering policy and the anti-bribery policy. Again, this has been revised. Again, there's not a huge amount of difference between this and last year's policy, with the exception, or the notable exception, of our previous policies have aligned ourselves with what was the UK anti-corruption strategy. That has now come to an end. And we now have sought to align this policy with the UK government's economic crime plan that runs between, let me just double check that runs between 2023 and 2026. It's the economic crime plan. I am grateful for Councillor Phillip pointing out a typo. It's not the economic crim plane, which I think is something very, very different. Rest assured that will be corrected before that gets published anywhere else. The economic crime plan is not a huge amount different to the anti-fraud strategy that preceded it, but it's far more widespread in its scope. It's simplified in terms of the 3 areas in which things are being looked at, and that is to reduce money laundering and recover more criminal assets, to combat kleptocracy and drive down sanctions evasion, and also the third one is to cut fraud. Now, as a local authority, as you can imagine, we are affected by at least 2 out of those 3. There is a link on the policy should anybody wish to have a look at the document. But as I say, that's the biggest change within that policy. And as Sue said, we're open to questions either now or at the end. But this is one for the committee to approve.
Any questions from members? Yes.
I just had
Councillor
one
Whitehouse.
thing to the money laundering. I mean, overall, you say they've not changed a lot, and if we thought they were good last year, I think we should think they were. We should agree them this year. But I was conscious looking through the money laundering policy, and it talks in there about sort of leases and payments and agreements and so forth. Clearly, quite a lot of that activity, as far as property transactions and management has transferred away from the council towards Qualis. Are they subject to the same policy? Do they have their own money laundering reporting officer and arrangements, or how is that dealt with? Given they are leasing, small, relatively low value, but high transaction properties and so forth.
Andrew. Oh,
I think in terms of property, they're providing a service to us, so they're still operating under our governance arrangements in that respect. So I mean that they make recommendations and work within delegations, but they're still our rules that they're working to when it deals with our property.
thank you.
But I can also confirm that Qualis does have its own policies that it follows in terms of anti-bribery, anti-money laundering, etc.
Isn't it more complicated to follow two policies than one policy? Because you'll always end up with a slight ambiguity about which one is the relevant one or what happens when they conflict.
As a company, to be properly based, Qualis needs to have financial policies that apply to it. Qualis does business that it does on behalf of Qualis, and it also manages our property for us. So in terms of the management of the property, which is a service, that is governed by our policy. Qualis itself has other activities which are not done as a service to us, and then in that context, their policies are preeminent.
Thank you. That's clarified. Thank you. Yes. So,
Thank you. So I'll pick up from paragraph 11, which is around the review of the local code of governance. The code itself is Appendix 5, and this document requires your approval. So the code of governance sets out the arrangements the council has for complying with the framework for delivering good governance in local government. And it's reviewed each year to make sure it remains fit for purpose and complies with the framework. So this year's review confirms that it is still up to date. The changes have been identified using bold and underline, and really the changes this year are around the new corporate plan starting 2023, and to reflect the fact that we've got an adopted local plan. And then following on, the report shows the progress made against the 22-23 annual governance statement, and you can see the action that has been taken to address those issues arising. And then finally, the update from the corporate fraud team. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
any questions from members? No? No? Thank you for that report. Thank you. So, where are we up to now? We've done that one.
Chairman, there's some recommendations there if the discussion's finished.
Sorry. So
There's some recommendations on the
accept
report, Chairman, yeah.
recommendations. Yes. No problem with that. Sorry. Yes, thank you, Gary. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. The order, item 9 now, yes. And who's addressing that? Sorry. Sarah. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, Sarah.
I think there was general agreement from the committee. I think I saw some nods, so I think it was agreed.
Right, thank you, Chair. So this report is an update on the Audit Committee effectiveness. So if you remember, we had an in-person workshop to assess the effectiveness of the Audit Committee, and that was reported in your annual report. And overall, the Audit Committee is effective, but there was a couple of areas where we just needed some clarification or some improvement. The skills and knowledge analysis hasn't taken place yet. I thought it would be prudent just to wait for the new intake in May and to do that exercise. And part of that is linking to the training programme. So we have done quite a bit of training with you as Audit Committee. So we've done assurance frameworks. We did risk management for all councillors. And then we've got another session in March about how I've developed the internal audit plan. And also we recommended, it was recommended that we follow good practice and that you meet in private with your auditors, internal and external auditors. And I've booked, we'll meet just before the March meeting to have that sort of open conversation there. Part of the other things that we needed to look at was the remit to make sure that the Audit Committee was fulfilling its function. There needs to be some more work around the Financial Management Code. So this is at the top of table 2. Work is going to be starting on that shortly. We have a template that we're going to be rolling out, and I'll be working with the finance team on that one. You need to know make sure that the internal audit service is a quality service, so you have had the results of the external quality assessment to show that we're fully compliant with the public sector internal standards, which means that you can rely on the work that we do. There was a question around whether we needed, if you as a committee needed further assurances around performance management and value for money, and there at the bottom of page 91 and 92 sort of gives you the indications of how you're getting those assurances already, so I don't think you need any more assurances, but if you need it then just ask for it and we can provide it to you. And the work of the Audit Committee around the ethical framework, wasn't quite sure again what it was we were expecting there, and then part of that was the whistleblowing policy, and you've had an update on that today. And then there at the bottom of the table is about meeting with Audit in private without any officers, so we can have honest conversations. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from members? No? Thank you. So we now move on to this one. Right. There, yes. True. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. We go on to item 10, which is the Treasury Management update, which is Chris, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Item 10, then, the Treasury Management Q3 update for 23-24. Members will recall considering the Treasury Management Strategy for 23-24 back in February of, I'll say this year, February of 2023, which was subsequently adopted by full council. This report, presented on pages 99 to 112 of the main agenda this evening, provides a Q3 update on that strategy. It considers both borrowing and investment activity during the year to date, and the report also considers how the council performed against the relevant Treasury management indicators set for 23-24. As previously mentioned in recent updates, this report is now prepared in accordance with the new updated Treasury Management Code, which was published in 2021, which was a new mandatory requirement for this financial year. And as part of that code, it actually requires a quarterly update as opposed to the previous 6 monthly updates. So Turning to the highlights then, first of all, borrowing, which is presented on table 3, page 105. The Q3 borrowing position is in December 23 has increased slightly from 281.6 million at the start of the financial year to 293.5 million compared to the position, most recently compared to the position at the start of the year. I didn't put that very well, did I? But that's mostly due to an increase of 13.8 million in terms of short-term borrowing from local authorities. That's the position as at 31st of December, I'd stress. Finance officers continue to closely follow the Arling Close advice, which often requires tactical borrowing decisions, shall we say, on a rapidly changing interest rates and a wide range of maturities. Investments then, and this is where the real story is in terms of this report. The Q3 investment balance as at 31st of December 23 has increased sharply by £79.3 million, in fact, from 14.1 million at the start of the year to 93.4 million by the end of December. And 66.5 million of that was held with the government and other local authorities, which represented the largest category investments. Most of it, in fact, was actually 61.5 million was held in the government's debt management account deposit facility, and the increase in investments, of course, is driven by a capital receipt of 88.215 million that was received just before Christmas following the land disposal at Northfield Airfield. Moving on to service investments then, table 5 on page 107. The loans that we grant to Qualis, from which the council receives a margin, are captured within the classification of service investments, as well as home assistance loans. The value, the overall value of outstanding service investments has increased by 15.4 million at the Q3 stage, which is up from 38.9 million at the start of the financial year to 54.259 million. And that primarily reflects the further drawdown of development loans taken out by Qualis. Moving on to commercial property investments then. An analysis of the commercial property investments that the council hold reveals that there's a balance sheet value of 148.5 million at the start of the year, based on the 22-23 or March 31st 23 balance sheet, should I say, with net income of 6.4 million after 9 months, which is very similar to the same stage last year, although I'd stress that rental income is expected to increase in the last quarter of the financial year, because there was a number of new rental agreements which entailed rent-free inducements to take out leases, so the actual rental income picks up as those leases mature. Commercial loans then, for the sake of completeness, the council has a single commercial investment loan outstanding to Qualis, and that's a 10-year maturity loan granted on September the 20th for 30 million. Sorry, not September, September 2020, should I say. And it's due to the nature of maturity loans, the balance outstanding remains static at 30 million. Finally, compliance. I'm able to provide Section 151 assurance that the Treasury Management activity undertaken during Q3 fully complied with the 2021 Treasury Management Code, and the committee can be assured that the transition from the 2017 to the 21 Code has been successfully made. I'm also pleased to confirm that compliance with reportable indicators was achieved in all areas in Q3. hardly surprising perhaps, but the liquidity indicator on page 112 was exceeded by some margin, with 54.2 million held compared to the target minimum of 15 million in terms of cash available within 3 months. And this is obviously due to the capital receipt. I'll stop there, Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Ryan. Yeah.
I've got quite a few questions, but I'll probably do them as item 13, so because they overlap quite a lot with the investment and strategy and stuff. But just on the asset value write-downs, when we value the assets, does it include the Qualis assets as well? Because I know some of the loans are on there, but the actual physical assets that Qualis own, do they get reported as assets of ours?
There's sort of two parts to that. The actual commercial investments, the properties that the council owns, they're valued every year as investment properties as part of the annual close down of accounts and the preparation of the balance sheet. So that's one thing that doesn't include Qualis's assets, if you like, other than they're consolidated within the group accounts, should I say. But the Qualis loans, in effect, are evaluated each year. Basically, the risk of default is assessed independently by our Treasury Management advisors, and that involves a mandatory sort of write-down, if you like, known as an expected credit loss on our balance sheet. So that's how the loans are reflected on our balance sheet. So that's why you get a gross and a net figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a different question, actually. It was a bit more of a technical question. So when the sale happened at North Weald, the income can't be considered a budget item because it's a capital item. But when we do investments, obviously this large investment item, the revenue from that can then be considered a budget item, is that correct?
That's correct. The capital receipt itself can only be applied for capital purposes, whereas the interest from the balance is a revenue item.
Thank you. Yes. Councillor Whitehouse.
Yeah, no, I just got one question to clarify on this. On page 107, in the table, it's an increase of 15.795 on the Qualis development loan, and in the narrative, it talks about an additional 16.25 million. And I may have missed something obvious, but what does the difference represent? I was sort of wondering why the figures weren't the same.
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question? I didn't quite.
So just on table 5.
Yep.
There's two different figures for development loans to Qualis. One's 15.795 in the table, the other's 16.25 in the narrative, and I'm not very clear on what the difference represents.
Andrew.
Do you know?
Yeah.
I imagine it's because it's netted down by repayments. So there's an advance, there's an additional £16 million advance, but £800,000 has been repaid, so the net movement is 15.2, whilst the advances are 16.2.
Thank you. Right. Is that the end of that? We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Treasury Management Strategy. Who speaks to that? Just again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. On to item 12, then, the Treasury Management Strategy for 24-25. So the draft Treasury Management Strategy, then, which includes the investment strategy for 2024, begins on page 113 of the supplementary agenda this evening. Members will recall that the preparation of an annual Treasury Management Strategy has been a requirement of SIPFA's Treasury Management Code for many years, subject to some modifications in the current 2023-24 strategy to reflect the updated code. The requirement essentially remains the same though, and the draft strategy for 24-25 is therefore presented for consideration in Appendix A on pages 116 to 130. In addition, since the issue of statutory guidance on local government investments in 2018, the Council has also been recommended to produce an annual investment strategy covering the Council's wider investment activities. This requirement has now become an embedded part of the new code, and a draft investment strategy for 24-25 is therefore once again presented for consideration at Appendix B on pages 131 to 138. Overall, this strategy reflects a slightly different picture compared to previous incarnations, with of course the most notable difference being the availability of resources to invest due to the North Wheel capital receipt. This also minimises the Council's need to borrow, with a number of short-term loans also being repaid from available cash balances. So, for example, I can confirm that the balance sheet trajectory is a reduction in loans outstanding at the end of 31st of March 2024. So both borrowing and investing, of course, is taking place against a backdrop of significantly higher interest rates than has been seen for many years. Although there are strong indications that interest rates are now peaked, with rate reductions anticipated in the medium term. As mentioned in the Q3 report for 23-24 that I just presented, the Council had 293.5 million external borrowing at the 31st of March, and that was partially, 31st of December, should I say, and that was partially offset by 93.4 million in Treasury Management investments, and the position is summarised in page 130. In terms of borrowing, as covered on pages 117 and 118, the Council's capital financing requirement, or CFR as it's known, reflecting the Council's underlying need to borrow, continues to rise, reflecting the needs of the capital programme, although it should be noted that the estimated actual borrowing, even allowing for carrying a minimum of £15 million investments, will remain below the CFR at all times, which is illustrated in particular by the chart at the bottom of page 118. This compares to the Council's actual borrowing to its liability benchmark. This is the level at which actual external borrowing is projected to progress in the coming years, although through consistently utilising balance sheet resources, including accumulated reserves, the Council should consistently borrow well below its capital financing requirement. As with last year, and in response to previous feedback from this committee, outstanding borrowing as at the 31st of December is presented in tables 3 and 4. Table 3 shows the outstanding PWLB loans of 232.2 million, whilst Table 4 shows short-term borrowing from other local authorities of 35 million. In terms of investments then, cash available for investments is substantially larger than it has been for many years. A minimum investment balance of 15 million is the core strategy recommended to maintain liquidity, and a full breakdown of the Council's Treasury Management investments is presented in Table 5 on page 123. The table shows that an overall total of 93.4 million was held at the 31st of December. And based on professional advice from Arling Close, Table 6 on page 124 proposes to continue with a cautious counterparty list which maintains flexibility for offices and eliminates riskier, more complex investments, whilst of course being proportionate to our investment needs. Pages 126 and 127 set out the usual Treasury management indicators against which we will report back to this committee during the year, as is established practice. Appendix B then, the investment strategy on pages 131 to 138 provides more detail on the Council's wider investments, including service and commercial investments. And members will note that the service investments, gross service investments of 38.9 million as at March 2023 included 38.5 million in Qualis loans. Attention is also drawn to page 134, which reveals commercial property investments with a net book value of 148.5 million, and also commercial investments in Qualis of a further 30 million. And to finish off on the concept of proportionality, this reflects the Council's reliance on investment income in context, sets the Council's reliance on income in context, should I say, with Table 4 showing that investment income as a proportion of gross service expenditure is expected to remain comfortably below 20% for the duration of this strategy. Tables 5, 6 and 7 on pages 137 and 138 provide further illustration as to the Council's investments. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor.
So just to clarify on a few points, I think you've explained them, but just to make sure I'm really understanding them. So the plan is therefore this extra money we've got from the sale to Google, which is a great sale, by the way, big fan of that, is that we're going to essentially pay down the short-term loans of 33 million. We're going to end up at some point with about 15 million in cash, and then I guess the rest of it's going to be used funding the council or long-term loans. Could you just explain a bit more exactly what we're going to do with this money?
I think Andrew's best to describe the future strategy around the loan. I'll hand over to Andrew, I think, at this point.
Thank you. I think the first point to emphasise is there's a difference between cash management and capital receipt and holding the capital receipt. So no matter until such time as we apply it to something, our capital receipt unapplied will be £88 million. That's important to recognise. So the council still has that and it's uncommitted at this point in time. But what do you do with the physical cash when you receive it? And that's in the realms of treasury management here, really. So there's no, if a short-term loan comes up for repayment, there's no point reborrowing another short-term loan when you're sat on £88 million of cash over here, particularly when you get more, you pay more money for the loan you're borrowing than you do than you receive to invest it. It's not the same as utilising the £88 million capital receipt. It's just about how do we handle cash from a day-to-day basis. Whatever we do in terms of cash management, we'll take the action that gives us the best return. I think in the short term, so we'll wash through short-term borrowing decisions against short-term cash holding decisions. There's something that we might want to consider around potentially repaying longer-term debt. That means an application of part of the capital receipt, potentially. But that's something that we need to think about before we make any decisions around that. So I think how we actually apply the £88 million is something that's still to be determined, really. And that's for the council to consider, as opposed to treasury management decisions, which is something in the officer's space, really. But there's no decisions yet about the application of the £88 million as a benefit to the council, really, in terms of how we spend it.
Yeah. Just to follow up, so just want to make sure I understand it. But the ultimate goal is to get down to 15 million, right? So this will be, I'm going to say, spent, whatever you use it on. We're in excess cash right now, right? Than our target.
So I mean, if we're paying short-term borrowing, or even as long-term debt comes up for repayment, if it's better to use cash that you're sat on to not reborrow, then we'll do that. And yes, that's the assumption that's built into here. but it could be superseded by the council's decision at how it wants to use that £88 million in the medium to longer term. So that will, that will ultimately, those decisions will have a bearing upon the Treasury Management Strategy, and we will have to revisit that depending upon the decisions the council chooses to take around the application of that money. I think Councillor Phillip, wants to.
Yes, Councillor Phillip. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Andrew's right. We haven't decided exactly how we're going to make use of it yet. We have factored into our medium-term financial plan the fact that interest rates, both for borrowing and for lending, are likely to go down over the coming years, and therefore the relative value to the general fund revenue from that 88 million will not be as great in a year's time as it is now. At that point, we may decide, as Andrew says, to pay down some short-term borrowing, some long-term borrowing. We might use it so that we don't have to borrow. But again, it's making sure that we use that capital receipt in the best way possible to allow us to continue to deliver the services that we want to deliver. And in the coming year, it forms a key part of what we're doing in terms of balancing our budget for next year. So I wouldn't expect to see us paying out an awful lot of that in the near future.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Wattas.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, what it does do, presumably, is quite give a lot more flexibility in terms of balance between internal borrowing and external borrowing in terms of funding the capital programme and funding other stuff. I wanted to ask a bit more about the rationale behind when we borrow maturity loans and when we borrow repayment loans, and presume that's partly related to when we're loaning on to Qualis or whoever, but just like to understand that a bit more, please.
I mean, we've predominantly been borrowing with what was known as EIP loans, basically equal instalments of principal, it's known as, and partly that's for accounting purposes, and also is because the way in which the MRP rules work, we're able to offset and repay, basically, sorry, I haven't got my capital financing expert with me handy tonight, but basically the way in which the MRP rules work, it's easier for accounting purposes. It's also fairly prudent. You're paying off, it's a bit like a repayment mortgage, if you like. And that some of those loans are restructured for different reasons. The Qualis loan, for example, the investment loan, is a maturity loan, and that was all part of the actual original business case for that particular advance to Qualis. Other councils do it different ways, and they work in conjunction with their Treasury advisors. I know of other authorities that tend to take out exclusively maturity loans. Some do equal instalments of principal. It's swings and roundabouts to a certain extent, but this depends on the circumstances. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think as a rule, I would generally recommend equal instalments of principal borrowing. The PWRB offers three different types. As Chris says, there's maturity, there's equal instalments of principal, and then there's a basic annuity, which is like a repayment mortgage, where your principal ramps up towards the end of the lending term, keeping your repayment, interest and principal at the same level throughout. I think it makes sense when we're acquiring assets to take equal instalments of principal, so that we're repaying the loan down at the same rate as we're using up the asset. And we usually take a loan at an equivalent length to the expected useful life of an asset as well. But I think the only maturity loan we're holding is for the Qualis commercial investment, which is a different type of transaction. It's not an asset we hold, and that's probably that's the only reason why this loan was taken in a different arrangement. But as I say, for borrowing for assets for the council, I would probably almost always recommend an equal instalment of principal loan.
Yeah, I mean, in value terms, there's more value in the maturity loans rather than the equal instalment loans, so read the table right. But in terms of numbers of loans, there's more EIPs than maturity, but that reflects the payment of money over to Qualis for their bits, their investments, presumably. The other question I wanted to ask was just to clarify on the page 36, the proportionality table that Mr. Hartgrove referred to, the investment income there, so that doesn't include interest on balances because that's treasury management income, is it? This is investment income on assets held to generate money. Is that correct, or does that include interest income as well? Okay. So why is it so, I mean, it's sort of flatter than I'd expect, given the variations in the sort of capital programme and so forth over the next.
Sorry, I do apologise. It doesn't include treasury management interest. I do apologise.
Okay, right, no, thanks.
Mistake, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Onion.
Just on the...
John, could you turn in?
Sorry.
A quick question on the long-term borrowings of the council as well, because I always get a bit confused because you have these CFR rates, whatever they're called, which aren't really real borrowings, right? But the total forecasted borrowing looks like it's going to go up for 2027. Is that correct? Could you just explain a bit more why we need to borrow and what it's going to be used for?
Sorry, the capital financing requirement is the overall need to actually borrow. That's the underlying need to borrow. But the actual borrowings, the actual external loans that the council takes out is a function of not only what it needs to raise, but also what it has in terms of the strength of its balance sheet. And because we've got a stronger balance sheet now, because of that capital receipt, we can use internal resources to a much larger extent than we've been able to recently. So that actually drags down the actual loans that we have to take out, if that makes sense.
But if I look at table 2 on page, which says page 118 on here, I don't know if that is the actual page number, the net loans required, though, is still going up for 2026, 2027, which is less the balance sheet resources, which I assume is partly cash. So is it forecast that our debt is going to go up overall, our net debt, if you like?
Andrew.
I'll talk about the CFR rather than net debt because I probably understand CFR better than I do net debt, if I'm honest with you. But the CFR is really a measure to stop councils from borrowing for reasons other than asset acquisition. So the CFR really reflects your capital programme. So your acquisition of assets, which you could borrow against. So that will go up as your capital programme spend goes up, basically. Less repayments of MRP, which is kind of a depreciation level, if you like. So that increases because the capital programme still includes some significant amounts for not just general fund spend, but also housing revenue account spend as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to take that debt. It just means you can't take any more than that through borrowing to finance your revenue needs. And that's what CFR is really to try and stop you from doing is take long-term borrowing to prop up your revenue account. It only allows you to borrow up to CFR for asset acquisition, if you like. Sorry, net debt is probably a quick one for Chris.
Sorry, yeah, I do apologise. That actual issue, I was floundering around looking for my table, but the liability benchmark is actually the forward-looking one is covered in the next report on page 146 in the capital strategy, which actually sets out the outstanding borrowing, and I can confirm that it actually reduces, as I've said, the trajectory is actually down at the moment. So because we're paying off those short-term loans, especially that accelerate, we're not taking out any other loans at the moment in the main, and it's on the way down, not dramatically, but it is on its way down for now until until the council maybe decides to do something else with the receipt or what have you in the medium term. But that's the current trajectory, so that's covered in the capital strategy.
I see that now on table 6, and that's great news. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah. So, recommendations that we accept this report. Yes, thank you.
Okay, the next one is the capital strategy.
Yes, last part of item 11, which is the capital strategy. Is that again, Chris, keeping you busy tonight? Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 13, then, the capital strategy, presented on pages 139 to 160. As with the Treasury Management Strategy, this is a strategy that has been required for some years now, ever since the 2017 Prudential Code, in fact. And this is the 5th capital strategy that the Council has produced, and the first under the 21. It's the second one under the 21 Prudential Code. In complying with recommended best practice, it's broad in scope whilst remaining relatively concise, and as well as covering the Council's investment plans, as recommended for capital investment plans, should I say, for full Council approval by the Cabinet on the 5th of February. Also picks up on the Council's wider financial commitments for the purposes of added transparency and ease of reference. Turning to the detail then, which is contained in Appendix A of the report on pages 141 to 160. Section 2 on pages 141 to 143 presents the Council's current and emerging capital programme, including the 24-25 to 26-27 elements as approved by Cabinet last Tuesday night. Covering both the General Fund and the HRA is a large programme, beginning with planned spending of 65.3 million in 24-25 and totalling 142.5 million over the next 3 years, up to and including 26-27. And because of the available increase in cash, as previously explained, the delivery of the programme is now expected to be achieved with a steady reduction in borrowing, as I've just mentioned. As with previous years, I thought it's still, even though things are slightly better at the moment, as with previous years, though, I still draw special attention to the comments of the Section 151 officer in Section 8.2 of the report on pages 155 and 156, where consideration is given to the prudence, affordability and sustainability of the programme. Wider topics considered in the capital strategy also include the Council's approach to asset management, treasury management as covered by agenda items 10 and 12 this evening, service investments, obviously covering the bulk of Qualis loans, and the commercial investments, which we've already covered, and also outstanding commitments and financial guarantees, and the way in which professional capacity is maintained through the development and maintenance of knowledge and skills and the selective use of professional advisors. And finally, and for completeness, Annex A of the strategy on page 160 is the Council's draft minimum revenue provision policy for 24-25. It's unchanged compared to 23-24, which was debated by this committee and recommended for approval and subsequently adopted by the Council in February last year. The policy ensures that the Council continues to act prudently in setting aside funds to meet the repayment of principal on loans taken out on the General Fund. Moving forwards, the capital strategy will continue to be regularly updated in accordance with the Prudential Code and any emerging good practice. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from members? No. Yes, sorry. John, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from an Audit Commission point of view, the questions or the conclusions we need to reach is similar to the conclusion that the Section 151 officer needs to reach in terms of, you know, is a capital strategy sort of affordable and sustainable? And, you know, I'm happy with, you know, what's laid out here, you know, particularly with the recent capital receipt, that it is over this term. I wanted to ask about section 3.2 when it talks about asset disposals. That doesn't seem to reflect the Northfield disposal. Is that going to be updated to do that? I see the sales mentioned elsewhere in the strategy, but not in section 3.2.
Chris?
I'll feed back on that point. I'll take that up with the officer in the morning. So.
Okay. Any other questions to this? Okay. Move on to the last item agenda. There's anything for exclusion of public and oh, can we recommend adoption of this strategy, please? Yes, sorry, I'm not good at doing that. Yes, thank you. Yes. So, are there any items for exclusion of public and press? Thank you. Thank you for the presentations, and I draw this meeting to an end at 8:27. Yes. Yes. Thank you. And a safe journey home.